All right, everyone. I thought I'd take a slightly different approach today. And in the past, we've looked at some of the most popular questions on Google and try to help those people out. Specifically because if some people have those questions and it's popular to be at the top of the Google searches, there's probably a lot of you out there that had those questions. They're usually more beginner focused questions. So an idea I had here is we take a look at what seems to be a beginner here and see them talk about developing their first game and any issues that they have, problems they have, maybe things were confusing to them or they don't know how to do things, they think something might be impossible. And what we would do is give our input on that and correct any misinformation or show how to do anything in particular that may have been a problem or think is impossible, etc. All right, so this video is from somebody or a channel called Sand for Days. And it looks like they've created some kind of slime game here. And let me know down below if you're interested in these kind of videos. Of course, it won't be all that often. Like the Google questions. They'll be just here once in a while, but I figured this will give us some real world situations, as well as some real questions that a beginner would have. All right, let's jump into it. And to note, it is going to sound a little weird just because I am speeding this up. I believe it's on 1.75.
Talking about how I got into making my game on Godot. I'm going to call it Godot.
Okay.
That sounds stupid. With that said, everybody was so positive. Now I just
Fair enough.
About this project with you all. The game I'm developing.
There's a lot of questions.
This is the first game I've ever worked on. I've never used a programming language like this before. My background.
Or rather, a lot of pronunciations.
Website, but typically I use the Adobe suite to cheat those things out too. I'm not very good. The reason I tell you, Brad, is because if I can do this, then you certainly can do this too, and probably a lot better. If you're anything like me, then you've always wanted to make video games, but you thought the barrier to entry was too high.
Yes, a lot of people do want to make games, and a lot of people do think that barrier is too high, when in reality, nowadays, the barrier is probably lower than it's ever been. With so many tools, you don't even need coding anymore, depending on the tools of your choice.
Or that you weren't smart enough to make a fun video game that people would like. I can tell you that both of those things aren't true, because Godot is free, and you are smart enough. So back to Slimes Can't Jump. What exactly is it? Well, Slimes Can't Jump is my first little platformer game with disappearing platforms. The idea is, you have the inability to jump, but slimes can propel you up into the air. So collect the slimes to move through the course. Initially,
Okay. You can jump, you jump on a slime, the slime bounces you back up in the air, kind of like a launch pad. And it's a platformer, and blocks disappear underneath of you. Okay. Interesting platformer. Typically, a platformer is normally a beginner's choice, or when you're taking a tutorial or course or whatever, a platformer is normally one of the first things that you're taught, or the style of game that is used to help you learn. So, all right. It's nice to see a nice little twist on this. Usually we have just normal platforms. You know, something a little more akin, I guess, to Mario. Whereas here it seems we've gone quite different, where we're relying on these floating slimes to bounce you around from one to the next.
Decided on this idea because it sounded as simple as possible. By removing the jump feature, there are only 3 options. You can move left, you can move right, or you can stop moving. And all 3 of those things are critical to the game. And you might be wondering, how is not moving an option? It's because if you're pressing one of the arrow keys while coming in contact with certain slimes, they will not perform the action you want them to. This entire decision.
Okay, so the slimes act differently.
I did not know how to make player momentum not cancel out blob momentum, so I just said, no, it's not a bug, it's a feature. So after testing out the whole let go or else it don't do the right thing idea, I actually decided I very much liked it. Having to let go of the arrow keys while playing this game is very stressful, and I feel like it adds an interesting mechanic. But like I said, I'm learning to code as I go along, so new mechanics will start to show up as you get further into the game as I'm learning to code them. A good example of this is the moving cube slimes, because obviously cubes are more structurally stable and they don't disappear when you jump on them. But they are partially alive and they don't really like being jumped on, so they do try to move away from you. And that's one of many things that I'm working on, like angry slimes that are going to approach you. You may need to pull them into certain areas to get the jump you need to reach other slimes, because they are slimy slimes, so you can still bounce off them. So that's about.
So now we've got platforms that are moving that you have to keep bouncing on and move with them, and they can go through the walls. Okay, interesting. He said something about angry slimes.
9 days of progress, and this is everything I've learned so far in action. The footage you're seeing is the latest build.
Okay, 9 days. It's not bad for a beginner. I don't know where this art came from, though.
Of the game, this game will be free when I'm done with it. It's really just a learning exercise, and I want more people to make it, because honestly, I've had more fun making this thing than ever.
That is the best way to learn, in my opinion, is through actual creating things, right? You can learn a technique or an algorithm, a pattern, a mechanic, whatever. But at least in my experience, it's best if you actually use it in a project in order to remember it or understand it better.
For playing a game recently. Games recently have just sucked for me, but making this thing, that is a puzzle I'm enjoying. Now, I would like
Very
to go into some
relatable.
detail about the things that I struggled with during my first 9 days so far, trying to figure out and learn that weren't quite covered in the tutorials I saw, or perhaps they just weren't easy for me to digest in the way they were being explained to me.
Okay, so now it sounds like we're going to get into these questions or problems that could use, or just things in general that could use some clarification. Okay, so let's hear what some of his issues are or
If you want
were.
to start developing your own game in Godot, I would highly recommend
Yeah.
check out Bracky's tutorial first. This is where I learned all of the basics that I'm using for
Okay.
this video. With all of that said, I would like to start going into all of the issues I've had so far, and what I would recommend to avoid getting caught in the same things that I did. The first thing that I couldn't do that I needed to get better at is letting it go. As is about to be shown on the screen, this death animation is not perfect. It is not finished. It's not animating properly. I spent 4 days trying to fix this animation. I finally figured out exactly why it's not working properly, and I haven't thought of a workaround yet, but I lost 4 days for something that at the end of the day isn't the biggest deal, and I can always fix later. So if you're where I was and you're trying to figure out how to trigger an animation or do a physics thing, walk away from it, work on something else in the meantime, because there are so many things to develop. You do not need that one aspect right now. Usually walking away and coming back is going to give you a new perspective.
Yes, definitely. You can certainly, if you're struggling, you just can't figure something out. You're sitting there for however many hours, or and I guess in his case, days, trying to figure something out, trying to get something to work or whatever. And like he said, it's not the biggest deal. He's got a death of respawn. It's not pretty. It needs better animations. Maybe he had a different vision for it, for how it's presented visually. But at the end of the day, the mechanic is there, and it's functioning as intended, right? And like you said, it's something he could always come back to and change and update later on. So he's right on that, and that you should. Some people really need to learn to just let it go.
Most of the times when I figured out something that was a little harder for me to code,
So notice that the window is not all the way over on OBS. Whoops. Okay, not that it really matters, but it was just starting to bug me when I looked over.
I wasn't coding at the time. I was doing something else entirely, like taking a shower or working on pixel art. So just walk away from it for a little bit. The answer may just come to you in the back of your mind. I'm not sure why it works that way. It just does. But sometimes you're trying to do something that's just a bit too advanced for you. So the second thing I had to learn was to scale it back.
Before we jump into scale it back or scale it down, uh, he's right completely about the situation. About sometimes you just really need a break, and a lot of times when you come up with your solutions to a problem, you won't even be coding or looking at code, thinking about code. You won't be working on your game, whatever it is, and you'll just come up with this idea seemingly just out of nowhere. And oh boy, I had one project where I sat here for about 11 hours trying to figure something out, trying to get all these workarounds to get things to work. Next day in the shower, it came to me that if just flipping the sprite would have solved everything. That's it. Just a simple solution. Just flipping the sprite should have solved all the issues I was having. But I couldn't think of it that whole time. I don't know why. All right, let's go ahead and take a look and see what he's talking about with scaling it back.
Initially, one of the core mechanics that I wanted in this game was to have raining slimes that happen in different patterns, and you had to wait for the correct one in order to properly progress through the area. And that shit was so far above my understanding when I first started to try to code this, but luckily I was trying to explain the problem to my wife, and she kind of told me that I was being an idiot and trying to do something that was a little bit above me as my first project. Which kind of goes back to my first point, because now that I've stopped focusing on how to make that mechanic work, and I've worked on making the base mechanics for my game, I figured out how to do the slime rain.
Okay, that's great that he figured it out, or he at least has some idea going on in his head as how to execute this. The first thing I was thinking of, because if we're gonna have this rain, right, then we could just simply look at particle effects, right? And I don't know if his different slime rain is going to vary by color, because if so, we can easily just change and adjust that color to get the different rains. and based on that color, you can toggle a variable, right? And of course, that variable would let you know whether or not you can jump on, or which slimes you can jump on. So I'm curious on his idea on how to execute that rain idea, because that was just the first idea that jumped to mind for how to possibly implement something like that. Of course, I don't know how his whole setup is,
For me,
but
I'm probably going to add that to the game. Now diving into the more Godot specific things. Something that tripped me up, but not for very long admittedly, is how the equal to, greater than, or less than works inside of Godot. A single equal sign means that you are telling the system that this
okay, it's not just in Godot. For this is just programming in general, and I don't want to say math because it's not always numbers, not that we're dealing with here. But it's just programming languages in general. It's not strictly a Godot thing or strictly a GDScript thing.
equals that. This can be used in commands in order to set momentum, like I use for my slime blobs. If there are two, that means that you are asking, does this equal that?
Yeah.
Which can be used to activate an if statement if the value does in fact equal what you're specifying. If there's
It's
an
true.
exclamation point and an equal sign, it says does.
Another word for that exclamation point is simply just a bang. Yes, that means not equal.
This not equal that. I could have definitely worded that better, but this is one of the most helpful things in the entirety of Godot.
To also write in there, you can also use the word not. So I'll just point out here with the pronoun just to be a little less confusing. You can say if, for example, 5 exclamation point equals or bang equals, meaning not equals to 10. Or you can actually use the word not when it comes to GDScript at least. So you can actually use the keyword. So if not 5 is equal to 10. I know that kind of sounds a little weird when you read it out. If not 5 equals 10. But it's the same way of saying not equal to. Alright. Just wanted to point that out there, that there is a way of doing that. If he needs maybe a little more, if he needs things to be printed out a little more, maybe you do. Really, it doesn't make any difference in this case. It's personal preference, though I usually go with the top option here instead of writing it out. Alright, let's continue with the video. See what other questions he's got.
Ask if it is greater or less than that. But with those two, you'll probably have a good grasp
Mhm.
from the Brachy's tutorial, as that's the system used to delineate between the animations that he has.
Or maybe it's just me, but in math class in general, if you remember it, there's less than or equal to, greater than, and greater than or equal to. At least I don't know about everyone else, but I had that in school. And I don't know, maybe he just doesn't remember it, or maybe it, for whatever reason, just wasn't taught in his school that he went to. But yeah, it's not strictly coding or strictly in the Brachy's tutorial. In my experience, it's just math class.
As you do. And the biggest thing
Let's
I think
go.
if you're coding in Godot is that you can preload scenes in order to use them in other scenes. For
You
example,
can,
I use
yeah.
a particle scene here, so I can trigger it every time one of my blobs is touched. When I finished Brachy's tutorial, there was a few things that I didn't quite understand, and that was one of them. He continued to reference nodes that were inside of the player scene, and I didn't know what any of that was. So when I tried to recreate that in other nodes, it would always tell me that it wasn't linked. I did not realize that you have to preload other scenes in order to get that effect. If you are having this problem,
You do not have to preload them. My mistake, I had that up on screen, but he just had this code up in view. No big deal. You didn't really miss anything. But he's talking about having to preload a scene, and you don't actually need to, because at the time you could come in and right. So let's say we have a variable called scene here, not scene multiplayer. Come on, I don't know why it's little laggy. Maybe I've got some updates that I got to go through, but you can come in at any point in your code, right? And you can just say scene equals, and you can load whatever scene you have, right? So we'll say res colon equals, right? And I mean, like you saw the pop up there, right? I have a node 3D scene, which is the scene that this script is currently in, but we can just load it when we need it. We don't have to preload it. And even if you want that already set before you run your game, right? I can just do that, but we can actually pass this as a packed scene, and we can export this. And now what will happen is if you look inside of your inspector, I'll pop it up just here in a sec. Do it like this momentarily. And you can see inside the inspector, we now have that variable exported. And if we open up the drop down menu, you can say new pack scene, which doesn't make any sense. We could just load it. And you can see here, we can actually just put our scene in there like that. So you don't have to preload it. You can select it inside of the inspector if you want to use the export, or you can load the scene when you need it and then instance it. Of course, if you know you're going to need a scene, you probably should already have it preloaded beforehand, especially if it's something that you can use frequently, right? Or just do it here in the inspector, and then it's already loaded, right? But I would prefer doing it through the inspector, personally, just because, at least in my experience, when I preload, it slows down the initial boot up of that scene. Whereas when I've had my scenes inside of the inspector like this, I haven't noticed that same slowdown. Maybe it's there and it's just not as bad, but I haven't noticed it. Let's jump back to the game, or the video. See what other issues you got.
Word it's simply enough for someone as simple-minded as myself. Maybe it's there and I just couldn't understand it, but I found.
Okay. Well, hopefully that right there, that I just showed you there, was clear enough for you to understand, and clear enough for others that may have that same question or issue to understand.
Out you can use an onReady variable to reference other scenes inside of your current scene, so then you can then use functions in order to access it. For example, I use a particle scene every time one of my blobs is destroyed or jumped on. Maybe better ways to do this, and every Godot veteran just like facepalms super hard right there because they're like, wow, that's the most basic jazz. But hey, I got stuck on it, so somebody else might have too. I did have.
It's fair. New people are going to get stuck on things that are going to seem really simple to someone who simply just has more experience than them.
One other issue when I was going through the tutorial, which is that I really struggle to use other people's content for just about anything. It makes me feel very guilty and dirty. So I was making my own variations of the bricks that were available in Bracky's tutorial, as well as making my own unique spray. You don't need to do that. You need to avoid doing that. Learn with other people's stuff for as long as you can, and then make your own stuff when time comes, if you want to. There's free assets everywhere. I'm not sure why I'm like this. Maybe because fair use has been such a talking point in the industry that I've been working in my entire life. So I don't know. Maybe that's just me. But if you've watched this far, now I can give you the ultimate cheat tool.
Yes. If you are just learning, purely learning, then it's okay to use somebody else's assets, especially if they've given it to you. But if you're going to make a serious game, then you should probably have your own assets, or go out and get something that's at least paid for. And I say at least paid for because if it's paid for, then less people are probably going to have it than if it was a free asset, which means there's less chance of a full or complete game actually being created with that art, which is probably an even lower chance that a game is released with that art, which allows your game to at least still stand out instead of looking like an asset flip. And that's, of course, assuming you go to somewhere like Itch, for example, rather than going and paying someone directly to create art. Obviously, if you're paying someone directly to create art for you, then no one's going to have that art except for you. You're already unique, even if your game doesn't come out.
To make your games better and your code more solid in a matter of seconds, to increase your understanding by a magnitude of no less than 13. And that's use ChatGPT to ask for an example.
To an extent, you can ask ChatGPT for help with things. However, in my experience, it's when I've simply asked it how to do something just to see if it could, it would give some roundabout answer or some long way that you really don't need to for a simple effect or a simple mechanic. A lot of times it's pretty good, but there's quite a few times, especially in the past, where it would tell you to use this add-on or plugin or use this function, and these things don't exist, and they have never exist, and it will try to gaslight you into saying that it did or it does exist. I've had that happen numerous times.
I know artificial intelligence is a hot button.
Now, using ChatGPT to help explain some code, maybe you asked a question and somebody wrote out this paragraph where they just gave you a piece of code. For a solution, you could put it in there and ask ChatGPT to explain it to you line by line to help you understand. And if it's still too complicated for you, you can ask it to explain it to you like you're 5, and that way it'll use very simple terminology and maybe some simple comparisons that'll help you understand what's going on better. So I wouldn't use it for specifically blindly, of course, for code, but maybe to ask it to explain things or how the functionality of how to make something. That way you can go in a step-by-step process.
Topic, and I'm not saying have ChatGPT code everything for you, but if you really can't find a way to make a certain type of code work and you ask ChatGPT to do so for you, 9 times out of 10, it will. That example, you can then re-articulate into your own code, your own style, and have it work. I have struggled with one thing in particular for a long time. I asked ChatGPT for an example of how to do it, and it explained it effortlessly. There was an issue that you need to be aware of, and that's that ChatGPT doesn't know anything about the newest version of Godot, as it's after 2022, but you can still use the framework to figure it out in modern terms.
Yes, if you're using Godot or Godot 4, ChatGPT can struggle a little bit with that. Again, with making things up or using old things that are no longer present or were replaced or renamed or moved to a different class, etc.
And that's just about all the lessons I've learned so far, but there are a few people out there who want to know exactly how the game development is going for someone as newbie as me, so I'll tell you real quick. On day 1, I built a little sprite for Jalorp, our main character of Slimes Can't Jump, using the Pixelrama tool, which is available online and was the one recommended on the Godot website.
If I'm not mistaken, Pixelrama is also made with Godot, unless I'm thinking of a different program.
There I worked on getting Jalorp into the game and started following Bracky's tutorial. I'm not going to lie, I was ridiculously excited when I got to this point where I could have Jalorp walk across the screen.
That's fair. That's something that really excites newer people, is seeing that immediate feedback and basically already having a, albeit simple, player controller already moving around a character on the screen. It's exciting.
I then decided I needed more animations for him, so I made this one where he's getting damage. No, it was not complete because I scrapped the idea of damage from the game. I then decided I was going to modify the Bracky's tutorial bricks to be a little bit. And this is the first time
you modified your bricks.
With that momentum, I made a falling animation and a slime that when you collected it breaks the game. This is the first time I've ever crashed.
Well, that's unfortunate.
So I was really discouraged. Luckily, I found this awesome tutorial.
How to make a satisfying 2D jump pad in Godot 4.
Let's just take a second because this guy helped me out so much. He's only got 2 videos on his channel. He has been active about 2 years. If you're not going to subscribe to me, at least subscribe to Unseen Peak. His tutorial is awesome and I love his devlog. Please.
Yeah.
Like I said, I was able to get my slimes to make me go into the air and not crash the game. I also found out I had
just congratulations for him pointing out another channel that was able to help him out. Even though the channel is inactive, as he said, that's still great. He's giving credit to someone who was able to help him out.
Some invisible walls. Chaos began to ensue as I decided to make new animations and to implement them properly while defining the idea for the game. I had to remake the slimes because I wanted them to be floating, so they needed to be more spherical, and then I moved on and began level development. At the end of day 1, my wife, my amazing alpha testers, found out that I built my model wrong. I'd have to redo the entire player sprite because it didn't quite line up with the boxes that it was stupid. It didn't make the right size. It had issues. On day 2, I fixed the model and also tried implementing a checkpoint system with these little mushroom minions. Wasn't done until like day 4.5. And on screen is where I nearly quit because I was putting so much work into all of these new blobs and these animations, and I just could not get a death animation to trigger. After trying dozens of variations in the code, I realized what I was doing was stupid, and I figured out I wasn't putting things in the right place, and I finally got a single frame from the death animation to trigger. I know why it's not the full animation, and I'm working on a fix now. I then
Yes, putting your lines of code in the right place, maybe in a specific order, or just in a specific position, can make a difference. I've had code at times where it doesn't trigger, or doesn't trigger as expected, and simply just maybe moving it down or up a line or two completely changes it from not working properly to working exactly as expected. It's a little weird, but depending on your problem, that may be all you need. Just the order of operation.
came up with the idea for
Or I guess order of execution.
cubes to help me make more complex puzzles, and I was super stoked about that, so here they are. Once I was satisfied with all the base mechanics of my game as well as the idea itself, I decided I needed my own world and I wanted it to be a lot more dark and mycelium inspired, so I decided to start getting rid of all of the Bracky's bricks that I was using previously, even the inspired versions, and make my own. And I think they came out really nice. And the last 2 things I've done occurred both yesterday and today, where I added particle effects to all the slimes when they had contact, as well as replacing the game world with my new one that's all mine. This is pretty much where the game is going to be for now. On screen is what the current version looks like, and I'm super proud of how far it's come along since day 1. It's only been about 10 days, and I've adored every single part of this except for the 4.5 days that I hated it. The next total week of development is probably just going to be extending the universe, because right now
Okay, so now he's just talking about go into the future where he wants to go with it, or what he wants to do continuing on. But I mean, congratulations, that's awesome that he was able to make it this far and any problem that he encountered, he was able to find a solution, find a workaround, or find something else that he wanted to do instead. Like with the rain, he's learned that he just had to completely let that go, and maybe come back to it in the future when he has a better understanding of what he's doing. And now he has an idea of how to do that rain. So it sounds like just in those few days, he's gone from knowing nothing to knowing quite a bit, and is ready to add something that seems so far advanced that he never had a clue on how to do. But all right, so that is from the video of, or from a video from the channel Sand for Days. Go ahead and let me know if you guys are interested in maybe this kind of video every once in a while. This way we can get some insight and questions from someone who's actually learning and has some actual, I guess, questions, versus maybe the Google or creating made up questions or forum questions from people that may have been coding for a while, whereas something like this is directly from a beginner who's just learning. If you like the video, go ahead and, of course, like his video. And where's that subscribe button? Right in front of my face, right there. Boom. There we go. I've gone ahead, liked, and subscribed to his video. If you do it, go ahead and give his video a like. Go ahead and subscribe to his channel. And that'll do it with this video. Again, let me know down below if maybe this style of video interests you, or if you think I should just skip these kind of videos altogether and just purely go back with the code and the top Google questions and things like that. All right, take care, and I'll see you guys next time.